Hi, my name's Cam Gott. I'm an executive ADHD coach, and welcome to my Positive Change Initiative. So we're looking at Principle 2 today. And Principle 2 is you can't derive positive results just from negative means. And if there's one principle that is the heavyweight in the room, right, it's this one. This whole Positive Change Initiative is really based on this one principle. So the focus of today is to really unpack exactly what this means and why it matters to global creatives who are trying to create positive change. A quick program note is that I know this is not a great product. I know it's not polished. I feel compelled to put this out in the world, and that the content usurps the polish. And if you want a polished version of me, check out the Translating ADHD podcast, where I work with Shelley Collins, another coach. And when I collaborate with others, there's a lot of polish. When I'm doing something on my own, I'm pulling stuff selectively. You can kind of peer into Cam's brain and kind of see how my ADHD shows up. And one of my biggest challenges is word retrieval, right? In the moment when there's no one else around. It's a fascinating phenomenon, right? So when I'm with my clients, when I'm teaching a class, I'm present, engaged in a flow state. And I'm here looking at myself and the camera and my notes. It is clunky. And so just to let you know, I know it's not great polish. I know it's not great delivery, but I'm going to get through this, and hopefully as I go through this, I get better, right? That's typically what happens. What I've learned is as we do things, we get better. All right. So I feel like I had to say that because it's in the back of my head and I'm putting it out to the world, and now it's out in the world. All right. So here it is, Principle 2. It's up on the screen. And really the working version of this principle is you can't react your way to greatness. Leadership coach Marshall Goldsmith, so he works with leaders and CEOs and executives. He wrote a book, and the book title was What Got You Here Won't Get You There. So he's focused on really a CEO's attitude of win at all costs, and how a win at all cost mindset or approach to business gets the business to a certain point, but it only goes so far. Then the CEO gets in their own way. And so going forth, it's really about letting others lead. It's a shifting of gears. And so Principle 2 is similar. The methods that have gotten you this far are likely not going to help you going further, especially in this category of sustained positive change. So what do I mean by negative means? Again, back to this idea of you can't derive positive results just from negative means. So global creatives are masters at reacting and responding to their environment. They use urgency and time constraints to get things done. Urgency taps into the fear center of the brain. So we all have this consequence-based motivation system, a motivation system that's based on, basically it's our oh shit system. What's going to bite me in the butt if I don't address it today? And so what we have is we've got this urgent time horizon that we sort of set up a perimeter, and inside that perimeter is urgency, and we can respond and react and get those things done. Anything beyond that, outside of that urgency perimeter or viewshed, it's really hard to start to address that. And that is actually synonymous with the ADHD experience. Right? When my clients come and I'm starting to, talk to them about their goals and what they want to do and how their ADHD shows up, the pervasive question that I have that they're asking me is, why can't I be accountable to myself? Others do it. They choose this thing, right? They pick this thing that matters only to them. And then they're able to do it, to plan it, to collaborate around it, to make it happen. This is ubiquitous with the ADHD experience. And it's a real head scratcher. It's a head scratcher for us, those of us with ADHD, and it's a head scratcher for the people around us. So I teach a class with Melissa Orloff for her students who graduate from her couples seminar. I teach a group coaching class for the ADHD individuals. And right there, again, you think about a marriage. A marriage is important and it's not urgent. It's the marathon. It's the long-term commitment till death do we part. And ADHD, we can't apply our urgent approach to creating positive change in that environment. And again, there's this quandary or conundrum of not understanding, is my partner not committed, right? Do they not care? Do they not love me? No, it's that there's ADHD in the room and right, each of you are important. The marriage is important, but you can always kick any dilemma down the road, tomorrow, next week, next month. It's like owning a house, having a house and the maintenance of a house. Typically, it's not urgent unless you've got a water break, but sort of home improvement and all that is really in this important category. Remember from principle 1, I asked you to start to scratch some stuff down on a piece of paper to get a notebook. I see this as a master class around ADHD coaching. And so I asked a couple things of you from principle 1, right? Principle 1 was your bandwidth is your number one resource for making better decisions. And one of the questions I asked was, noticing your bandwidth as you kind of went through your day and went around my change model, starting with contemplation, ideation, into determination and activation. Noticing bandwidth and what zaps your bandwidth as you go around that cycle. So my guess is that you use a lot of brute force and efforting. Right? If you have ADHD, if you are a leader or an influencer or a decision maker, you likely have more on your plate than you're able to manage and a lot of balls in the air. And the way that you're making things happen, your primary tools are a hammer and a crowbar. These blunt yet effective methods. I'm also going to guess that you are no stranger to stress. We use stress responses to identify, prioritize, and activate for task. So stress and urgency are bedfellows, right? They help us get through our week, maybe through the quarter, maybe even through the year, through this pandemic. Stress and urgency only go so far addressing these bigger, important things, the bigger goals, the bigger dreams that only matter to us. This thing that I'm doing right now matters to me, no one else. And you know what? I'm finding it really hard to do because I've got a lot of other things that are going on. And yet I am compelled to do this, to find a way to make this happen. This is not urgent. It's not urgent. I can create urgency around it, but really it just doesn't fall into my urgent view shed or time horizon. Here's the other thing about stress is that it zaps our bandwidth. If you have stress, if you use anxiety and stress to get things done, to kind of froth up a vigilance and an attending to, it can really siphon off bandwidth, right? Bandwidth was that ability, it's that cognitive capacity and executive control. And this is executive functioning, This is decision making. This is that shifting gears. So let's take a look at my change model that I shared with you for principle number 1, right? Noticing your bandwidth. And here are these sections of, again, contemplation, ideation, determination, and activation. Kind of heady words, I know, but I think that they're really relevant. And if you start to pay attention to this, then it'll start to make more sense, right? So the idea of this was you enter into this place of contemplation. Before you know you need to go to the gym, there's this point of pre-contemplation. So pre-contemplation is you don't know what you don't know. You haven't addressed a need yet. So in contemplation, you address a need, going to the gym. Then you think about, getting in shape, right? Need to get in shape, need to address my health issues. It's a Q2, it's a Quadrant 2. I'll get to that in a second. It's important and not urgent. And so then you move around to ideation of how is that going to look, right? Brainstorming. We move then into determination, and that's sort of, again, committing, prioritizing, decision-making. And finally, you move into activation of what are you actually going to do? So last time with principle 1, I talked about, again, these sort of natural barriers that can block moving from one phase or stage to the next, right? ADHD is a matter of being able to transition effectively from thinking to doing and back again, right? So this is about thinking and determining and pivoting, these mechanical moves. It's like that car transmission, being able to shift gears effectively. Those of us with ADHD, we've got neutral and we got fifth gear, right? Those are our reliable gears. Hyperfocus of fifth gear, or we're standing still. So this is clutch work. This is the ability to kind of move around, pivot through your day. So there are those blocks that I was showing you, right? Sort of how to transition from stage to stage. We can also kind of drop down into a vortex, right? Sort of a vortex or rabbit hole with respect to each phase, right? So now I think this is going to start to make a little bit more sense than these, words, again, these terms that I've used. But think about contemplation, right? If you contemplate too much, where does contemplation trip over into worry and fret, right? Into rumination and high anxiety. Right? This is a form of anxiety. If you contemplate or you're ruminating on something and going through a cyclic, ruminating on, negative self-talk. And so that is where you get kind of stuck in contemplation by worry, by excessive thinking. If you are racked with indecision, or you commit to something and then uncommit, right? If you have a hard time with prioritizing, if everything presents equally, which again is another fascinating ADHD phenomenon, that everything on your plate it's all shouting at you at the same level, right? And so this is over in determination. I know what I need to do. I'm not sure which one to pick, right? Getting pulled into the next big idea. If you listen to the Translating ADHD podcast, you know all about me and my big idea generator, right? That big idea generator and that next idea is so compelling. I just kind of keep working it, massaging it, playing with it, brainstorming. And again, I'm kind of stuck in ideation. And then finally, are you a slave to hyperfocus, right? It's like, I get people come in like, Cam, that elixir, that hyperfocus, can you deliver more of that? So hyperfocus is, again, it is a drive mechanism that is derived out of our fear center, right? It conjures dopamine and adrenaline and creates a hyper activated state. And we lock in and we write that dissertation, right? We deliver the goods. And yet often that hyperfocus, it doesn't come on demand. What it does is when you have that time constraint, that real time constraint, it tends to activate. The fascinating thing that I see is that over time, and as you age, right? I've got a lot of gray. I'm 57 or 57 in a couple of weeks, right? As you go from your 40s and 50s and 60s, you start to lose that ability to summon hyperfocus, right? Those blunt objects, the hammer and the crowbar, are not as effective. And so part of this whole positive change initiative is I want to convey a tone of hope, right? There is a way. That part of what we do in coaching is to really start to look at what are some positive structures that we can look at and develop that can support you in moving around this and addressing those things that only matter to you, right? So strengths, values. And this is more in the positive neural network of the brain. And, as you have, we're not going to give up this consequence-based motivation system, but if we can bring in a complementary incentive-based motivation system. And that's what this whole initiative is all about, is what I'm going to be talking about. How do you bring that in so we can have a hybrid system? I just want to share one more slide that I think is, again, to leave you with and to give you some ideas or a little practice between principle 2 and principle 3. This is the Eisenhower Time Matrix, right? Covey has sort of claimed it too. So if you Google this, you can Google Covey Time Matrix or Eisenhower Time Matrix. And the reason why I like this is because it's really hard for us to distinguish this quadrant 1, which is the urgent and important stuff, right? The firefighting, the crisis du jour, from the quality stuff. And when we're in an urgent state, we can just collapse them, right? Urgency makes these quadrants almost indistinguishable. And when clients come to work with me, it is because they're frustrated at not being able to attend to these quality items, right? In their relationship, building out their business, right? Taking their business to the next level. Global creatives are great innovators and survivors. And ADHD gets in the way of moving from that surviving place into thriving, right? And so part of this and part of what I do with my clients is crack this Q2 code. It's hard. It's not easy. Again, ADHD, executive functioning, it is this amazing obstacle or challenge to gain access to Q2. These things that really matter and are not, they just don't fit into the urgent. Some things do slide, right? If you wait for that, we're talking about the house and maintenance, and you wait for that water line to break, right? It becomes urgent. You've got to fix it. But a lot of things, right, are just sitting there quietly, and in our reactive response mode, it's hard for us to attend to them. So this week, or between principle 2 and principle 3, is start to distinguish quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. Identify what are these things that you're not getting to, that you can't be accountable to yourself to make happen, right? Starting to make a list of these things that really matter. And watch out for that idea generator, right? It's that idea generator can just be prolific and just fill out your plate. Right? I had to attend to that. I had to realize I can't do everything that pops out of my head. I can't complete it, right? Episode 4 of the Translating ADHD podcast really addresses this whole idea of urgency. And we talk about the ARC cycle, adrenaline response cycle, where we summon, again, with hyperfocus and adrenaline, we summon adrenaline, engage in hyperfocus to get things done. But it's frustrating because we can't attend to these Q2 things. The other thing, again, the other categories, I wouldn't say that category 4 is waste. I think it could be escape, right? Not important, not urgent. But again, replenishing bandwidth. And if you go off and you're doing something with others, it doesn't necessarily fit into the category of important, right? But we all need a break. The other one to watch out for is Quadrant 3. And that's the stuff that others deem urgent, right? It's that email that you get and someone's like, hey, can you help me out with this? And you're like, sure, because you're a master responder. And it's like, it's your way that you get things done is don't let it go into your organization system, right? Just take it. And as David Allen says, addressing the latest and loudest, right? So again, I want to say, first of all, if you're kind of like, oh my God, I have this, I operate out of my, fear center and I can't summon anything else other than urgency and stress. Relax, right? I wouldn't be doing this. I haven't been doing this for, I wouldn't do this for 20 years and continue to do this unless there were ways forward. Right? So first of all, breathe, keep doing what you're doing. Because again, it's the way that you get things done. But just start to be a little bit more aware. And that sort of will be a future principle, right? Aware and curious and just, noticing this stuff, capturing, and I'll see you in principle 3.